Now, of course, counting is indeed taking place in the United States election race, and a race that's clearly been described now as too close to call. The United States is indeed on tenterhooks as Donald Trump has claimed victory even and has vowed to even launch a Supreme Court challenge alleging voter fraud. If we unpack this a little bit more, we have Dr. Thokozani Chilenga-Butao, who is a lecturer in political studies at Wits University. It is indeed a good afternoon to you. The interesting element here is that the Democrats had hoped that they have a whole host of areas in which they're going to challenge from, and unfortunately, very few of them panned out. In fact, only Arizona, and they weren't even expecting that one.
Thank you, Aradile, for having me. Yes, this election has definitely been a surprise in many ways, and the Democrats were expecting some sweeping victories in certain states. However, as you noted earlier, this is an election that is too close to call. It really is an election that has brought out many Americans in their millions with record numbers of turnout at the moment. So we just have to wait and see what the Democrats end up, as well as what the Republicans end up with, and just hold on a little longer for the results.
I suppose now all for Joe Biden kind of hinges on Wisconsin as well as Michigan at this point in time. Michigan, he's still behind by around, 70,000 odd votes or so. Of course, with around 87% of the voting having continued there. Do you think then that it's a little bit of a hurt, though, for the Democratic Party? Because they'd hoped there'd be sweeping changes across most of this, that this would be a referendum on Donald Trump. And even if it is, clearly, however, many still want him in office.
Yes, so I think it is disappointing for the Democrats, but I think they are still holding out that hope. We have to remember that in the same way that many people showed up to vote for Donald Trump in the first election where he was elected, many people will also show up this time to vote for him. So both sides are really on tenterhooks. And maybe the Democrats overestimated the sweeping results, but we have to hold on, as I say, and make sure that all the counting is done, as Joe Biden has said, and that any challenges are on a legitimate basis and not simply on projection.
Yeah. Dr. Thokozani, do we know what this means, however, if Donald Trump does indeed head towards the Supreme Court in order to perhaps stop the counting of votes or stop any kind of voting that, of course, has stopped at this point in time? But would that change things quite prodigiously? Would it just halt things as it currently stands? I mean, it's unprecedented, as we've continuously said.
It is unprecedented, and I think we would need to have a reason as to why the voting should be halted or stopped. I think, the counting. I think what this shows is that Donald Trump is quite insecure about the results. If you remember, this process is the same process that led to him being elected in 2016. And so the question is, why now is this process not good enough for him as the incumbent? He has been consistent in discrediting the process even before it began, especially with regards to postal or mail-in voting. And so now the challenge is, why is the system not good enough for you as the incumbent, and why would you want to stop a process that has been perfectly legitimate until now for centuries?
Yeah, it gets really interesting there as well. Then, what does this all mean, though, for South Africa? I mean, depending on who wins, of course, at this time. If Donald Trump does remain the incumbent and remains in office, does that change things a little bit, or does that perhaps leave things exactly where we've known them to be in terms of consistency of policy?
In terms of what we've seen in recent years, Donald Trump doesn't view South African or even African countries very favorably. So I think we can expect more of the same. If we somehow end up with Joe Biden, then we would have to see in the medium or the short to medium term how that affects international trade, how that affects international relations between our continent and our country and the U.S. but it would also have to be viewed in light of the pandemic, which globally is still raging. And so each and every country is looking internally about how to stop the pandemic, as opposed to looking externally about how to now build relations between countries. So it may still be a while yet before we figure out how this election determines relations between South Africa and the USA.
Yeah, patience will be the name of the game, even when it comes to the results of this election. Dr. Thokozani Chilenga-Butao, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. Appreciated. Lecturer in political studies at Wits University, as we unpack that market, that election picture as well. Just perhaps if we can try and give you a quick reminder of where things stand as well. 238 electoral votes is where Joe Biden currently sits with regards to the election out in the United States. Donald Trump sits on 213 odd as well. Haven't been able to call Nevada as yet, and haven't been able to call Wisconsin, but they both do look like they're headed the way of the Democrats, while Michigan, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, and Georgia seem to be headed the way then of the Republican Party. So too then is, by the seams of it, Arkansas, Alaska out on that front there too. 45% reporting out on that front. Well, we'll continue to see how things fare. Of course, SA Today will continue with that at 3 p.m.